today is Monday the 20th, and I think I'm in labor, which is quite exciting. So we're on our way to the midwives right now. We're actually stopped at a store. So we'll see what happens. It's a good day to have a baby. Here's the belly. Oh. Hopefully next time I show a shot of my belly, there won't be one. We'll see. Okay. Alrighty. So last weekend I posted a video saying I was really hopeful that this weekend I would be posting an introduction video, and I have one to make a very important introduction. This is Cassie Fern, and she was born on Monday at 12:39. So I wanted to share with you guys a story, and I also wanted to share if any of you ladies are pregnant with your second and really dreading the whole experience of giving birth because you had a hard first experience. I really hope this video will encourage you because, wow, I am still in utter shock with how my birth went and cannot believe it's over and cannot believe how easy it was compared to my first experience. So I'm super excited to tell you guys about it. So Thursday, I filmed that video talking about how I was still waiting to have the baby and how I was really hoping to have the baby by Thursday, which is actually today, or else I would have to be transferred to the hospital and have to change care because I was so overdue. So Thursday, I filmed that video. Friday, I got sick. As you can tell, my voice is still not quite right. Saturday, I was really sick. Sunday, I was really sick. Actually, I think it was Saturday, I posted on Instagram and I asked you guys to be praying that I would have the baby because I really didn't want to have to go and have it at the hospital instead. So Sunday, my husband went to church and he asked everyone there to pray as well. And I just slept like the entire day Sunday. It was so nice. And Sunday night, I went to bed feeling totally normal, except other than being sick. And I woke up around 2 in the morning having contractions. And I didn't really think a ton about it because, like I mentioned in previous videos, I've had a ton of contractions during the night and they've just pattered out and been nothing. Well, you guys, presently I am at 40 weeks and 4 days. I'm headed to my midwife appointment. I did not think I would be going to this appointment because I thought for sure I would have the baby by now. But there is no baby yet. So I've had probably 3 times so far that I've thought that I was probably in labor and I wasn't. And so this has been very different than with Carrie. There was only one time with Carrie before I actually was in labor with her that I wondered if I was. So, all that being said, I am feeling massive. I am feeling very ready to be done with my pregnancy. And so hopefully the baby will come soon. And so I was really trying not to get hopeful. Had these contractions consistently. They started out at like 8 minutes apart. They worked themselves down to about 4 minutes apart within an hour. And they weren't growing in intensity, but they also weren't fading away. So I eventually fell asleep because I was like, these contractions are obviously just gonna patter out like all the other contractions I've had. So I fell asleep. This was probably around 3 o'clock. And I woke up at about 4 and I was still having the contractions. And I was like, well, that's a little bit surprising, but I'm sick. I don't think I'll go into labor naturally. I'll probably have to do the castor oil induction method that the midwives do. I think it's called the midwife brew or something. And so I had talked to the midwives even on Sunday about trying some nipple stem and some of those other things, and they were like, I recommend you just rest and try and get well because your body's probably not going to go into labor as long as you're super tired and sick. So all that being said, I wake up again around 5 o'clock and I'm still having these really consistent contractions, except now they've gone from being like 4 minutes apart to being more like 8 minutes apart, but really consistent, somewhat intense, but not terrible. So I go back to sleep again after I went down and I took a bath and I shaved my legs and I got all ready just in case this was the day. I go back to sleep and wake up at about 7 and I'm still having these contractions and they're still about the same amount intense and about the same distance apart.
And I had told my husband when I had woken up around 5, I might be in labor, but I'm not really sure. And I've told him this once before at least. And so we both were not taking myself too seriously. So we just rested and laid in bed till like 7:30, and it was so nice. And the contractions were not that bad. And then I got up and started kind of getting myself ready, and I did a load of laundry, and I put the dishes in the dishwasher, and I kind of picked up the house, and we got our stuff packed, and still having these super consistent contractions. So we got our daughter ready, and I took her over to my mom's house, and we loaded up in the car at about 8:30, I think. So we get in the car, and I was like, well, I should call the midwives and tell them, although still I'm really nervous that I'm not actually in labor. So I called the midwives, and I was like, so I think I might be in labor. And she's like, okay, well, what's your activity like, or whatever? And I was like, well, they're about 7 minutes apart. And she's like, okay. I was like, I had a little bit of blood this morning. She's like, okay. And I was like, and I think I might be in labor. And she's like, okay, well, have you guys left yet? And I'm like, yeah, we're just leaving. And so we have a little over an hour-long drive to get to the midwives. And so she's like, okay, we'll meet you there. So we're driving there, and I'm talking to my husband, and I was like, you know, it would be so exciting if we get there and I'm dilated to like a 3 or 4. That would be crazy. And then I asked him, I was like, when do you think this baby could be born? And he's like, I bet this baby will be born by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, yeah, no way. I bet it will be born like this evening if I'm even in labor. So on the way, we decided to stop by the store and get my daughter and Cassie matching sweatshirts. So my husband goes in, and I'm having these contractions still about every 6 minutes apart probably. And while he's in the store, I have this really intense contraction. I'm like, I think I'm actually in labor. So we get to the midwives, and we go in, and my contractions slow way down. And the main midwife, she's like, do you want me to check you and see how far along you are? I'm like, yes, please do. So she checks me, and she's like, well, you're easily a 6, but I could stretch you easily to a 7 or maybe even an 8. And I was like, what? And I'm just utterly shocked. And so I start like shaking super bad, and I think I just had this huge pump of adrenaline. We kind of just rested and relaxed, and within like half an hour, my contractions came back again really strong. And they were still, though, like pretty far. They were still, though, pretty far apart, like not super terrible or anything. And so we're kind of just resting, and the midwives leave us alone, and my husband and I are just laying on the bed. And finally, one of the midwives come in, and she's like, well, I'm just gonna start the tub filling up. And I'm like, what? Start the tub filling up? Like, probably right now it's about 11 o'clock. So the tub's filling up. So she's filling up the tub, and I'm like in utter shock as I'm having these contractions on the bed. Like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way we're at this stage in labor already. And so the tub's getting filled up, and my contractions are getting pretty intense, but they're still pretty far apart. Like, we were laughing and having jokes in between and drinking water and eating snacks. And so a little while passes. It's probably like 11 o'clock or something, maybe 11:30. And I asked the midwives, I was like, do you guys think that I'm going through transition? And they're like, yeah, I think you're probably in transition right now. I was like, what? You've got to be kidding me. And so it was just nothing like what I had experienced with Carrie at all. Like, I felt like I was just flying through these stages of labor, and they were really not that bad at all. Like, you could do this every day. It was so much different than with Carrie. And we've only been there for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I'm so sorry. My brother keeps riding by on his dirt bike. Bad time to be filming. So a little while longer passes, and the contractions were pretty intense, and I was having a ton of back pain during the contractions, but in between I just felt amazing. I had lots of time still in between to recoup and just relax and talk. And so then the midwives are like, okay, well, if you want, you can get in the tub. So I get in the tub, and it just felt so good. I super encourage you, if you're gonna do a natural birth, if at all possible, have a water birth. It takes away so much of the pain, and it helps so much. Everything is going super well, and one of the midwives, she's like, well, if you start to feel an urge to push, you can start pushing. I'm like, what? So it's just so different. And so I had a couple more contractions, and sure enough, I started to feel the urge to push. And up until this point, you could have done this labor every single day. Like, it was so different than with Carrie. I had these great breaks in between. The contractions were intense, but they were going pretty quickly, and we're all laughing and joking in between contractions. It was just awesome, and my husband was pushing on my back, and the midwives were just so great. I love them so much. And so sure enough, I had a couple more contractions, and I started to feel that urge to push, and I did get pretty nervous at this part because I was so terrified of tearing again. And with Carrie, I just tore so badly, and I have no clue what to expect with this one because I figure my tissue is probably a lot weaker, and it was just a really scary experience with Carrie. And so it was different though than with Carrie because I just felt a lot more present and like I was more able to experience everything that was going on. And so like when I pushed, I could actually feel the baby coming down when I was pushing. So much different than with Carrie, where it was just like shock and pain and tear. And so with this one, it was just, I felt a lot more present and a lot more in tune with my body and what was going on, and a lot more, I was able to actually recognize when I was pushing what was kind of happening. And so that was really different. And so this part was extremely intense and was very painful. But even that being said, between the contractions though, no matter how terrible the pain is, you do get some relief. And I say that hopefully to encourage any of you ladies who are terrified of this like I was, that yes, you have this intense pain, but then in between the contractions, like I filmed this and I would never show anyone because it's very scarring, but it's interesting even to watch because you'll go from such intense pain to actually being able to have a completely normal conversation to being in such intense pain again. It's such a weird experience. And so this part went on for almost exactly a half an hour that I pushed Cassie out. And it just felt really fast though. It was definitely incredibly painful because the midwives had me take a lot of breaks trying to prevent myself from tearing. And at the time it's like, is this even worth it? But let me tell you now, it is so worth it. I feel like with birth, especially towards the end, it feels like you're coming up against this wall of pain where you like can't endure anymore. And yet every time you hit that wall, the pain subsides a bit and then it builds again, and every time you're able to go a little bit farther until finally you actually birth your child. And that's kind of the best way I can explain it. And so after a half an hour of pushing, Cassie was born, and I was so ecstatic, and it was the craziest feeling in the world. And she was born beautiful, and her head wasn't even that cone shape, and it was so crazy. So within the next 20 minutes, I birthed the placenta and climbed right out of the tub and went right over and climbed up onto a pretty tall bed that's in there. And it was so funny because I told my husband, I was like, that was literally the easiest time I've had climbing on a bed in like the last 2 months. Like I just felt so good. I felt so good. And since then, it's been 3 days, I think, and wow, I do not feel like I just had a baby. I feel the best right now I have felt in the last probably 2 or 3 months. Like I'm not nearly as sore. I don't feel like I have this basketball between my legs. I sleep so much more comfortably. I feel so much more mobile. I feel so good. I'm so happy. I did not tear, which was a huge praise, and I prayed so much that I wouldn't tear. I prayed so much that my pelvic floor would survive the entire ordeal because it's already weak and everything seems to be doing great. They put a little bit of super glue on one little tear that I had. They didn't have to stitch me at all. I feel so good. And so we had the baby at 12:39, and by like 4 o'clock we were getting in the car and driving home, which was just crazy. We brought her home, and my mom and the kids brought my little daughter over, Carrie, and they got to meet, and that was so special. and something I've been looking forward to since like the moment I found out that I was pregnant. And so yeah, since then we've been resting and I've just felt amazing. And Cassie is just the sweetest little baby. I'm loving every moment of being able to be her mother. And we are just doing so good and I feel so blessed. And thank you everyone. For those of you who prayed for me that I would go into labor naturally, who's praying I would have a good labor, I am so thankful. I feel like my heart is just at a continual state of praise right now. So I'm so grateful. Stay tuned because in the next week or two, I'll have some exciting announcements that I'll be making that I've been working on a lot the last month in particular. But I'm just super excited for what I'm sharing with you guys. And yeah, stay tuned. Thank you everyone so much, and thank you for meeting Cassie Fern. All right, you guys, I'll see you hopefully next weekend in my next video. Bye-bye.